this episode, the elephants meet former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull AC. It's a feast for the mind as they talk threats to the rule of law in a world of lies and shifting narratives, taking on the British government in the Spycatcher case, and how he used his legal training to tackle the big issues as Kerry Packer's lawyer and as PM. It's a ripper, so strap in.
Royalty in today. This is the lead up. Do the seat. Do Malcolm's seat. That's Malcolm's seat there. There's no chewing gum on there, is there, Vasi? Check. Yeah, check. Do under the seat. Yeah, good. How about the table? Is there any dust on the table? Hold on. Look who's coming today. Look who's coming to dinner. Just vacuum in front of, vacuum the top of the book. It's been in Kevin's bookcase for a while. Yeah, good. See, this is the lengths we go to here.
You can be a guest
and
as well.
Look at the quality of equipment we're using. This is all time. So good. We've got Malcolm today. We're very excited. We thought we'd give Bussies a room vacuum. It hasn't had one for about 2 years by the looks of it. Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome to Elephant in the Courtroom, the show where we look behind the routine appearance of the law and speak to some of the people involved in it. Today we have a fantastic show. We've always been dedicated to trying not to undermine your confidence in the rule of law, and today's guest is someone who should have given and certainly has given us a great confidence in the rule of law, and he is none other than Malcolm Turnbull. Vasi, I'm incredibly excited about today's show. Are you?
I am very excited. I'm a bit inspired and overawed by the occasion, but I'm looking forward to getting into everything he's ever talked about.
There's very little Malcolm Turnbull can't speak on about Australian political life in the last couple of decades with some authority, but also he was a lawyer for a few years before he got into politics eventually after having had what appears his sights set on it for some years beforehand. But he did some pretty amazing things, even in what I might say, with all due respect, a short-ish career in the law. He obviously was quite famously involved in the Spycatcher case, which we'll talk about with him today. He had his own firm briefly while he was doing the Spycatcher case, because he appeared not as a barrister but as in his capacity as a solicitor. He had a firm with a man, Bruce McWilliam, a very well-known commercial lawyer. He and Mr McWilliam were doing work for Kerry Packer, and they ultimately formed their own firm and were on retainer by Mr Packer. And then during that time he was involved in defending Mr Packer against allegations made against him during the Costigan inquiry. Yep. His response to that and his strategy there is very interesting. We can talk about that as well. But Vasi, this idea of the rule of law, we've mentioned it a few times. We haven't really. It's a little bit like Mr Turnbull, really. It's got so many dimensions to it that it's really hard to know where to start when discussing it.
Yeah.
Before we started today, you referred me to a paper by the ex-Chief Justice of the New South Wales Supreme Court, Mr. Tom Bathurst. And he described it as a rule which protects against the arbitrary exercise of power. How do you understand it in practical terms, Vasi, the rule of law? Can you give us, for example, any recent examples in our own community where the rule of law at work?
Well, let me go back a step. Firstly, the rule of law, we've often, it's referenced in our introduction every episode. And we do that, I think, quite deliberately, because we want our audience to appreciate that whilst there's two practising barristers at the New South Wales Bar, we're really unpacking themes. We're unpacking the issues that arise in our courtrooms, how we go about it, we reveal some of our thoughts, some of our fragilities, we reveal some of our methods, and we look at how the judges in the modern day litigations are dealing with certain things. But with that, we try to give a raw, unfiltered account of ourselves. We try to give a raw, unfiltered account of the work we do. But we always say that in doing so, we don't want to undermine anyone's confidence in us as being people who take the job quite seriously, who appear in court earnestly and faithfully to law. Because more and more what I'm noticing, and I think the modern world is experiencing through just information being spread rapidly through either social media or major news outlets controlled by certain narratives, people are beginning to live in their own realities. We're no longer seemingly having debate, in my view, about the same things anymore. We seem to be having debates we're not seeming to have debates by bringing two perspectives to the same issue. The debate seems to be caught up in a monolithic sort of identification, a singular identification of an issue, and people are living there in their own realities, and the algorithms in the social media sphere seem to perpetuate that.
Facts and truth are obviously very important to lawyers, to us. I mean, again, we've spoken about that, about the notion of truth. I think we spoke about that last time, that it is still a relative construct because it's only as good in our world as the evidence which supports a said fact in cases. But as you are saying, that notion of truth and facts has become very, very blurred because of all of the ways in which information is disseminated and opinions and ideas are disseminated these days through, obviously, social media and the like. And therefore, how does that filter back to all of the other institutions? How it's actually, just to give a really basic example, because I think AI is a way of truth becoming, or facts becoming, sort of embedded or accepted that aren't necessarily as reliable as we might like them to be. And there is this, I suppose, battle going on in quite a obviously worthy and necessary way. For example, the Supreme Court issuing the practice note about use of generative AI in evidence, experts' reports, and there was another release very recently, a new procedure rule, the Uniform Civil Procedure Rules, which govern all of us in litigation, about using AI to generate someone's, particularly their affidavit, because you can imagine it'd be always tempting, particularly for a self-represented litigant, to draft their affidavit in speech that's generated by AI. Write me an affidavit that says, I went to the shop and I saw such and such happen, but it won't be in their own words.
There's been so the artificial intelligence world that we're in is seemingly cutting right through this rule of law issue. So that's certainly one example. And I think the courts are dealing with really big challenges in that space. And I want to draw your attention to a case in a moment. But just on that topic of the sort of challenges, or what is the rule of law? And I alluded to that paper that Chief Justice Bathurst gave. He was very concerned in 2021 about the attack on the rule of law, especially when people, like I just said, are living in their echo chamber of social media. But he sort of defined the rule of law as being, he said that, well, I think his point was it's incapable of definition, but it has sort of 5 central components that he's been able to identify. No one is above the law, and the law should apply equally to persons in like circumstances. That's one. There must be an independent and impartial judiciary free from political pressure. And that's a really interesting one because...
It sounds familiar, doesn't it? It might be something we'll touch upon with Mr. Turnbull.
Exactly. And as a corollary, there must be a separation of powers, and that's the fundamental bed.
So just for everyone to know that, for example, the legislature not telling the judicature how to do things,
and the executive then operating in its own sphere.
Yes,
they work in a sort of symbiotic push-pull relationship to keep everyone in, to keep the laws governing and enforced properly and interpreted appropriately.
Yes.
The content of the law should be accessible and reasonably clear and consistent. I dare say that one of the advantages to artificial intelligence is that an argument is that it is providing parties with access and an availability to understand legal principles in a perhaps a bit more human-like way or a little bit easier way to understand. Laws must be administered fairly, rationally, predictably, consistently and impartially. Everyone must have the right to a fair trial, including the presumption of innocence. So
that's why it's so broad. There's all these limbs to it. Can I bring it back to freedom of the press, for example, Vasi? Can we talk about, because this is something again we've heard Mr. Turnbull speak about on his, he has his own podcast, Defending Democracy.
It's a wonderful podcast.
Wonderful podcast. He speaks about these sorts of issues. But just to take the example of freedom of the press, okay, it's a fundamental right. It's protected in the First Amendment, American Constitution. But is it under threat? What role does it play in the rule of law? Like, how does the rule of law play into that? My understanding is defending the law's defence of the freedom of the press as a fundamental right. Is something that enables us to have better systems. So it all feeds into if for example, the press can't criticise the government about something that it's done that it needs to be brought to account on. Obviously government ends up having unfettered power. Yeah. Again, this notion of what Mr. Bathurst referred to as the Tom Bathurst referred to as arbitrary
and it's a really simple concept. Nick, my 7-year-old stepson was walking through Pitt Street the other day and had observed a mass gathering of protesters protesting the occupation, the current circumstances in the Middle East. And he was asking some really interesting questions of, he asked me, can the Parliament hear the protesters? Can the Prime Minister hear the protesters? If they're not here, how will they know? And I said, well, they'll probably figure it out on the news or they'll be told about it. And then he thought about it for a while and he thought, so if they don't listen, then they won't get elected next time? And he got it.
Certainly, he got it. And that's pretty advanced. And that's some compliment to your son, by the way.
Yeah, and I just thought it's a simple concept. But then when you have that debate with people perhaps more senior and arguably experienced in the world, their position might be, what's the point of it all? And then questions like that get sort of lost in the...
A couple of decisions recently, haven't there been, that have brought into this issue?
Justice Belinda Rigg in the Supreme Court recently, allowed the Palestinian Action Group to, in a sort of fairly balanced judgment, allow them to proceed on the march, which had over 100,000 of people. Yeah. They proceeded to do that. Antoinette Lattouf was able to protect her rights on the basis of being unlawfully dismissed in circumstances where the ABC had cut her contract short.
To speak out about an issue she was passionate about in a work context.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and we're seeing, and I'd sort of bring those examples up, including my son's example, just to point out that these are issues to do with the rule of law, and you might disagree with them, but you might have a view about them, but ultimately the rights are determined in accordance with a framework, and that framework has to be upheld for coherency in our society. And Chief Justice Bathurst, I just wanted to say that, described it, that the rule of law is a two-sided covenant. It requires both that lawmakers respect the community and the community respect lawmakers.
Absolutely. I mean, similar to the sort of social contract, I guess you'd call it. But I like this idea of, I mean, I think the most basic thing that everyone can identify is equal treatment before the law, right to a fair trial. And if you get yourself into some legal trouble, or even if you need to pursue a remedy through the courts, obviously it'd be pretty fundamentally important to you that at least you're afforded that. And we take that for granted, by the way, here in countries like Australia, but it's not. It doesn't happen everywhere, as far as I can see.
It's seemingly brought to light, I think, in our faces when we look at the current situation in the United States. It appears from observing it from where we are, that the respect for the judiciary, the respect for due processes, are sort of swept away in this MAGA-inspired rhetoric that all process, all systems are an existential threat to us. And in those circumstances, they need to be washed away. And I feel as though, and it's quite frightening to see the leader of one of the most regarded democracies in the world speak so confrontingly and so abruptly about democratic institutions and a concept that we take very seriously.
Well, there's a dangerous irony to it, though, as well, because these rule of law, for example, is a foundational principle to a successful democracy. If you ask any American, well, what is your system and why is it cool? Well, it's highly democratic. We are a democratic nation, and but eroding these things takes you further and further away from democracy. In fact, where you end up, I'm not suggesting that America is anywhere near sort of fascism or whatever, but if you start, for example, silencing the press and saying certain press members can't come away can't cover the president. There was something about the other day about a trip that President Trump took to Scotland. And one of the press members was, because of what had been going on with, as I believe, what had been going on with the Wall Street Journal, one of the press members wasn't permitted to come along to cover him.
Speaking of the Wall Street Journal, one of the greatest ironies about News Corp and Murdoch is that the biggest supporter and perhaps biggest platform that Trump has now become his enemy, at least in one defamation action that he's brought. A topic we've covered.
And a topic we've covered, but big defamation actions are sort of seem to be very much de rigueur here and abroad. I mean, we're not a political show, Vasi, but we say this for illustrative purposes only.
I don't think there's politics in fundamental values.
This is what I mean. I mean, what we're talking about is, so how does this, if these things are if we all agree they are foundational to a successful democracy, how is eroding them eroding democracy? Like how is it really affecting what ultimately everybody can really take for granted until you don't have it?
But how do you think, what do you think's led to the loss of confidence by those that listen or participate in the system? What is it that you think that's led them to lose the confidence, to have these existential issues that perhaps is giving rise to the more right wing or more extreme ideological?
I'm going to use this as a bit of a segue, not really to sort of get out of answering your question, but it's something that I do think Mr. Turnbull is eminently qualified to speak about, and I know he has had expressed opinions about what it is and spoken to the best people.
Sure.
So a number of whom appear as guests on his Defending Democracy podcast about how this is occurring and what the process is. And I don't profess to be any expert on it, Vasi,
no, that's fine.
We can ask him.
We'll finish that note on a recognition, as George Orwell is attributed to have said, in a time of deceit telling, the truth is a revolutionary act.
And a great quote. And again, are we in a time of deceit? Possibly in a number of respects. If you look at some pretty concrete examples of the effect social media has been having on big things like elections and the like. But anyway, Vasi, have you had any? How's your caseload going? Have you had? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about briefly about case preparation and case theory. I know this is sort of back to the nuts and bolts of being a barrister, but I just found it really interesting reading about Mr. Turnbull and how he prepared the Spycatcher case.
Well, I just asked ChatGPT-5 now.
Yeah.
All my questions.
Do you?
Yeah.
What, on case theory?
Yeah. Well, what's my case theory?
So you say, I've got a case where this is what's happened, but you're not putting our names and details in, obviously, Vasi, because you can't, because I'm not into OpenAI, maybe into Claude.
Well,
but you're putting a no names account.
I hope you would have detected the sarcasm in my proposition.
Yeah. So imagine if you did. Be interesting to see if it could do it though. But that might be for another show.
Well, you know, I'm good with my demos, so I'll come back to you with that in a moment. Look, I have a series of trials that are coming up back to back. So my preparation is sort of planned and compartmentalised in respect of a number of trials.
What's your process though on case theory? Because do you start wide and whittle it down? You have a first read of the brief and you kind of...
So I have what I call my... I borrowed this phrase from a book that a friend of the show, Kevin Connor, gave me about how to prepare a brief. I've forgotten the author's name, but I'll come back to the comments. I'll put it in the comments. I have what I call the madman phase. The madman phase.
Yeah.
So I get the brief, I draw pictures, who the people are, stick figures. Anyone that's worked with me knows that I can't start a case without drawing a stick figure of the people involved and drawing a little house if it's a family law case, or a car or a company.
Oh, because
but not just that. Even on a personal injury case or a corporations case, I'm a visual guy. I go to the back of the brief, I go to the middle of the brief, I go to the front of the brief, I read an observation. I just go a little bit manic with my brief, and I write a bunch of notes. I then get a sense of it, and then I come up with generally a case theory that is what I describe as my best point.
But a case theory ultimately, as far as I can see, is a narrative, right? So, and because in any case, you really there's just two opposing narratives, right?
But what do you mean by the narrative?
A story.
A story.
Yeah, what's the story that you're selling?
Yeah.
You've got to sell a story to the court that's more attractive, because it has to be, doesn't it, to try to win, more attractive than the other person's story.
Is that like politics?
Well, it is. But this is what I mean, and this is what's really interesting, again, bringing it back to our guest. He seems to be a master of narrative, who's an expert at controlling narrative.
Yes.
Who does that really well, who's either did it beautifully in a massive case, difficult case, found the narrative line and pursued it. I mean, yeah. But then did it outside the law with the some of the legal skills and knowledge he had, controlled the narrative even in the public space, because obviously he also had a journalistic background. So that's a really interesting part of today as well. And I think... it'll be great to have Mr. Turnbull on shortly. And is there anything else you wanted to chat about before we do?
I just wanted to pick up on your point about, artificial intelligence, and I know that it's our somewhat buzz topic lately, and it was interesting to discuss it with you in detail on our last show, and I think you foreshadowed to me a topic that I hadn't really anticipated: the rise of the self-represented litigant. And would you believe it? Just a few weeks later, the Court of Appeal, presided by the Chief Justice Bell, Justice Payne and McHugh, heard an appeal in the case of May and Costaris. For the law nerds out there, it's 2025 Court of Appeal 178. By the way, just as an aside, a fascinating case about joint endeavour constructive trusts. If anyone
fascinating
wants to, for the law nerds out there. Yeah. But in that case, the respondent, who was successful, uploaded her entire brief, it appears, or the papers that she had, into ChatGPT or some sort of generative artificial intelligence software, and made a number of submissions. And she referred the court to the case of Tate v. Rag, 2024, NSWCA 306. a case that does not exist, and cited it for a number of authorities. And what the court was, I think, was very respectful of the respondent, who they said was doing her best to try and put forward her position, but had a number of submissions that were clearly developed by generative AI.
Totally inapt.
And totally inapt, totally off the point. And there was just this, I think this is really what I'm trying to get at, is that there's a massive amount of caution that needs to be utilised when we get to the issue of using artificial intelligence. The quote that I want to draw your attention to was a decision of the High Court, the President of the King's Bench Division of the High Court in England, who said this: "In the context of legal research, the risks of using artificial intelligence are now well known. Freely available artificial intelligence tools, trained now in a large language model, are not capable of conducting reliable legal research. Such tools can produce apparently coherent and plausible responses to prompts, but these coherent and plausible responses may turn out to be entirely incorrect. The responses may make confident assertions that are simply untrue. They may cite sources that do not exist. They may purport to quote passages from a genuine source that do not appear in the source." So, there is a massive amount of concern in the area.
But are they going? I mean, this is the thing. The self-represented litigant is thinking, I don't have enough money for a lawyer. How am I meant to do this? Well, I've got this tool available to me. I'll take the risk. The only thing is, if it ultimately, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be objections to the admissibility of those things. There's going to have to be some...
Or to the submissions. But imagine if you're sitting on the full court and you get this set of submissions that are arguably, well, let's assume that the technology improves or they're refined in a way that does make it...
But they're really good and better than that person.
Really good. And you probably have to determine the case on those submissions.
But what if they're better than you think that person could have generated themselves? Do you say to them, possibly that's what you would say as the judge, did you write these submissions or
that's
did you not?
That's what happened in this case, but she was self-represented. But of course that wouldn't happen to you because your mind is so fright that
but she won.
She won. No, she won. Okay. Can I just test something? Because I would like to, I'd like to try my...
you've got a trick. You've got a... Okay, what have you got?
Hello, are you there?
Absolutely, I'm right here. No need to worry. Just let me know what else is on your mind.
I would like to know in which volume of the Commonwealth Law Reports would I find in the High Court of Australia the decision known as the Spycatcher's case?
Of course. Just to recap that for you, the Spycatcher case is in volume 165 of the Commonwealth Law Reports. So if you look in that volume, you'll find the High Court's decision there. Let me know if there's anything else you need.
And what page is it on?
Absolutely. So that decision starts on page 30 of volume 165 of the Commonwealth Law Reports.
165, page 30.
Thank you, Vassi.
Let's have a look.
Exactly. You got it. Volume 165, page 30.
She's very helpful.
The Spycatcher decision kicks off.
165.
Okay.
Anything else about it?
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay,
look, prove to us you're right. I've no doubt. Well, this is again...
1988, CLR.
Yeah.
Let's have a look.
Page 30.
Her Majesty's Attorney General in and for the United Kingdom v. and Heinemann Publishers Australia Proprietary Limited. On appeal from the Supreme Court of New South Wales for the appellant T. Simos QC with W. Caldwell QC and M. Robinson.
For the government.
For the appellant. M.B. Turnbull for the respondents.
On his very own.
On his very own.
Excellent.
Before the full court, Mason, Wilson,
and the
Dean,
result
Torson,
was?
Tui, Gordon, JJ, and...
How many?
Where do you find the result? It's normally at the back, right? I therefore agree that the appeal should be dismissed. Appeal dismissed with costs.
Splendid. And on that note, we will have Mr. Turnbull in a very short moment. So it's with great pleasure that I today introduce to our show the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull AC. An enormous and great honour to have Mr Turnbull on our show today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you. Mr Turnbull, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Please call me Malcolm.
Oh, thank you very much. So I won't give a CV, Malcolm, because firstly, I think your CV is very well known, and secondly, I think it'd be a bit long for us to cover. And we have, at the time we have it with you is precious. So,
Okay.
but where I'd like to start is just in your early years. So you were brought up mostly by your father.
Yep.
In Sydney's Double Bay. He was an electrician, and then he moved into pub broking. Is that right?
Hotel broking, yeah.
Hotel broking originally. He was a member of the North Bondi Surf Club in Sydney.
Yes.
A home or a hub, at least as it was then, of larrikinism and great probably banter back in the day.
Yes, I suspect it probably still is. But
Yeah, well, exactly. Probably in a modern way, and possibly more brought up to times.
well, it's co-ed now.
Co-ed, exactly. But I heard your father had, my father's in fact a long-term member of North Bondi Surf Club as well. But I heard he had a very sharp wit, your father, Bruce. And did you sort of early on, once you sort of realised, when did you have a lot of repartee and exchange with your father and banter and debate? Was that something that you had early on?
Yeah, absolutely. No, he was very engaging, very funny guy, lots of stories. And yes, he was very witty and had lots of sayings, little things. I mean, he had some sayings which I still use. He would say, so-and-so is as easy to get as a packet of Rothmans, which of course is impossible to get.
I love
it. Lots of. Yeah, no, he was good. He was a great friend.
Was it your father that inspired the work ethic? I mean, what we just found fascinating about your life is just the fearless sort of work ethic that you bring to everything.
Yeah, well, I've always been a hard worker, restless, I suppose. Yes, my father was very hardworking, but so was my mother. I guess.
When did you sort of discover that you had this a bit of ability or desire for debate? You seem to very much enjoy debate. Obviously,
I think probably straight out of the cradle.
This is what I thought might be the case.
Yeah, I always loved performing and talking and giving speeches and being in plays. You were
in plays at school, Shakespeare plays, weren't you? And you're a good debater. You won the debating competition, quite a well-known one among the Sydney schools, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And did you back then think, when you're starting about what you wanted to do, did you think, probably, did you think barrister back then?
I did, yeah, I thought of it. That was an option. I wasn't great at mathematics, but I should have tried harder at mathematics, to be honest. But I did very well at English and history and the sort of literary subjects, so I tended to focus on them.
I've been listening to A Bigger Picture.
Oh, yeah.
Putting my 6-month-old to bed and got one earphone.
I think you should put that into the 6-month-old's ear. That'll send him to bed.
I've got to say, I did think about it in certain chapters, but what I couldn't sort of get away from was how, even in the first few chapters, we're hearing about Harold Evans from the Times, your Kerry Packer's special counsel, you're having chats with Murdoch, you're then off to build a firm with your best friend Neville Wran, and I mean
Nick Whitlam.
And Nick Whitlam. Yeah. And then you're having sort of casually hanging out with Tom Hughes, all in your sort of late 20s, early 30s, if I've got younger than that. I'm just wondering myself, were you at the right place at the right time? I mean, Nick and I were debating this, or was this just the world you were born into?
Well, I absolutely wasn't born into that. I mean, but I got to know, and it was really journalism that got me access to a lot of these people. I mean, Neville Wran was sort of a special case in the sense that Neville had been at university with my mother.
Right.
So I'd known him. I mean, Neville used to say, that he had known me since I was en ventre sa mère. In other words, when my mother was pregnant with me. But I became reacquainted with him and a lot of other political people when I was a political journalist. Right. I covered state parliament in sort of from 75, 76, part of 77 for...
At the Bulletin?
Well, originally for the Nation Review and 2SM, and then so what happened? I got myself a job at the Nation Review when I was all this time I was at uni, so I was full time at uni, but I always had jobs when I was at uni, and I
studying law, right? Oh, that was later.
BALLB, yeah. And then I got a job at the Nation Review, and then I was working for them essentially as a stringer. I think they guaranteed me, some pitiful amount per week, but I was basically paid for the I think $30 1,000 words or something like that. Sure. And then I was paid, so I got a press pass at Parliament House, State Parliament, and then I persuaded 2SM that I could do stories for them, $12 a story that went to air, and then I persuaded Channel 9 that I could string for them as well, $40 a story that went to air for Channel 9. So I had so I could not be lazy. I had a vested interest in creating news, and if it was a quiet news day, I would stir something up.
Right.
But
that's unlike you to do that.
Yeah. Well, there was a guy who was in those days the member for Manly. I think he was a Liberal member for Manly called Douglas Derby. This is like 75, 76, this is a million years ago. It was 50 years ago, so just, yeah. And he was an old prude who was, always going on about the decline in morality and sinfulness of the younger generation and so forth. And he used to, one of his things was he was very concerned about young women, teenage girls, schoolgirls going out on dates without chaperones. This was terribly improper. And of course no one took any notice of him naturally, even in those days. And I remember, just to give you an idea of how entrepreneurial I was, one day there was nothing happening. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this is going to be a dud. I'm not going to get anything from 2SM. I'm not going to get anything from Channel 9. There's nothing to write about. And so I thought, Douglas Derby. And I said, Douglas, this is your day. And I said, this is when you're going to go to town on this terrible problem with young women going out without chaperones. And so I took him out with a crew out to a girls' high school, just as school was breaking up, and 3 o'clock or whatever. And so I got these girls around and I said, this is Mr. Derby, he's the member for Manly, and he's very worried that some of you young ladies are going out with your boyfriends without chaperones. Well, you can imagine, it was fantastic television.
And what did Douglas?
So what I'm.
What did Douglas Derby make of that day?
Oh no! He got to make his point.
He got on television.
He got on television. I helped him out, but
he got his point across.
It was, as they say, a win-win outcome.
Very good.
Matt, you've always had a good eye for some controversy and how to use controversy to some effect or some end, didn't you? That was something that you had even been using back then. I know you did it when you were with Kerry Packer, and you had the Goanna business with the Costigan inquiry, and you issued the letter, which was
a statement.
8,000 we were discussing that off air about how astute that sort of skill set was.
It was a very, very interesting thing. So the interesting thing about Packer, looking back at it, my great age now, is that he, recruited me to do all of his legal work, and as his general counsel, and we didn't use outside lawyers. At the time I was the general counsel of Consolidated Press, we didn't use outside lawyers. Other than, we used the bar. We used Silks, Silks
Mr. Hughes
like Tom Hughes or Alex Shand or someone like that. Yes. But I did a lot of the advocacy myself. But we certainly didn't. It was like Allen and Hemsley were devastated. They'd lost all that business. And to save Kerry, saved him millions. That was a million was a lot of money.
You guys did all right out of it too, because you had Turnbull, Whitlam.
Turnbull, McQuilliam, and then
Turnbull,
then I
McQuilliam,
set up
and then Whitlam, Turnbull. My apologies.
Yes. Bank, yeah. But the interesting thing was that when I was 28, it never occurred to me that there was something unusual about him reposing all of this confidence in me as a 28-year-old, because naturally, as a bumptious 28-year-old, you assume you're a genius.
They believe in you.
Yeah, and you just assume. And I look back at it now and I think, craps, if I had a big, big business, media empire, etc., would I put all my legal affairs in the hands of this young guy? And not sure that I would have. So, kudos to Kerry for having the courage to do that.
But you were bold enough to accept the work, I suppose. I mean,
he initially raised it with me, and I didn't say no, but I deferred it. And then because I was at the bar, I was really enjoying the bar, and I was doing well at the bar. And I thought, I've got a great future here. I quite enjoyed being a barrister. And then my dad was killed in a plane crash, and he had, I say he was not a wealthy man. I guess he was wealthy, but not, he wasn't rich, if you know what I mean. He had interests in pubs and, but they were all small interests for the most part. And so he had a kind of a messy estate. And I thought to myself, gosh, I really need a quiet year in this sleepy corporate backwater would be perfect, and I can just sort out all Dad's affairs. So I rented my room in Phillip Street in Chambers and Selborne Chambers for a year, and I said, I'm taking a year out, and of course I never came back.
One of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is the method, the fear that barristers have in running their cases with, self-doubt, conviction, imposter syndrome.
Did you have any self-doubt at that stage when you're there for Kerry Packer's asking you to seeking your counsel on massive deals, decisions? Did you ever have any? I know you've said you were fearful because of the way Kerry was. He was highly unpredictable and liked to do things close to the line. But
I was only fearful in the sense that he would get more trouble and I'd have to get him out of it. But yeah.
Yeah, but did you ever have any sort of sometimes realise the sort of enormity of what you were doing, or were you just so engaged in trying to get it right that you just got on with it? I mean,
look, looking back at it, I have to say I was remarkably confident. I was probably overconfident, but I had acquired, and I think the BCL I did at Oxford, which, as you know, is a pretty dull
Bachelor of Civil Laws. Yeah,
it's a black letter Master of Laws called the Bachelor of Civil Law for some reason or other. But anyway, and I felt I was confident that I was a good lawyer, good black letter lawyer. And although, there are obviously, the law is specialised, as you know, but there'd be areas where I would have to do a lot of reading to get myself up to speed. But I was confident that I had the analytical skills. And the thing that was, often challenging, of course, is less so much the law, but the actual, the courtroom practice, the techniques, the advocacy, and all of that comes with practice. So when I was doing advocacy, I was very conscious that, I had to really prepare well because I was dealing with, often, with Pike in the Spycatcher trial, there's a bunch of silks, Theo Simons and Bill Corbell and others against me, all of whom had much more experience in court. But oddly enough, I think Lucy and I, and that was basically our legal team, we, despite our inexperience, just through hard work and focusing and making sure that we, paid attention to the detail, I think we were able to handle that litigation better.
So how many trials did you run before, when you were a barrister proper?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good
Could
question.
it be, say, a handful at the moment?
It'd be a dozen, but not 2 dozen, if you know what I mean.
I don't say this to sort of understate your experience. The point I'm seeking to make is you hit Spycatcher. You'd had a couple of years at the bar.
Yes,
you might have done some advocacy that Silks didn't need to do when you were working for Mr. Packer.
Yeah.
And this case sort of falls in your lap in a way, like it comes to you, and you don't think, well, I'll run the case. Bruce McWilliam and I will run the case and we'll instruct a barrister. You think, no, I'll run it. I'll turn up in court.
Yeah, well, the client didn't have any money, right?
Of course.
So the client could not afford any barristers. So I did that case for the agreed fee was $20,000. And an extra amount if the trial went for more than
2 weeks.
More than 2 weeks, yeah. So I think it was a.
And so that's when you had done your stint in chambers, and I think you were cautioned against being a lawyer by those that were leading you in, as a journalist in England. They were saying,
well, Harry Evans, the great newspaper editor, Harry said, the law is boring compared to journalism, and and he said, if you become a lawyer, you'll become a barrister, then you'll become a judge. Ugh, how terrible is that? Then, or he said, even worse, you could become a politician. So at least I didn't become a judge.
Lingering in the background, though, I think you always seem to have your eye on politics, though, because while you were at the bar, you ran for pre-selection a couple of times there, and that didn't work out. And obviously, as we know, eventually it did, and you got going. But
the first time, they ran for Wentworth the first time in 1981, and I'd just gone to the bar, and Luce and I were just back from England, and that was really just for the hell of it. I mean, I remember saying to Lucy at the time, I said, look, there's probably some solicitors on the pre-selection committee, so, I might impress them, get a bit of work. Mm-hmm. I didn't, and so to my astonishment and her horror, I nearly won it.
Yeah. There seems to be a bit of that with you, like having a crack out of curiosity.
I'm always happy to have a crack.
Yeah,
I think it's always been a strength. I think.
Looking back though, at your time as an advocate in this Spycatcher's case, which I don't know if you're familiar with this law report.
The Commonwealth Law Reports, yes, I have. I've stumbled across a few volumes.
You don't have it at home?
Well, I do. I used to have a huge law library, but I gave it away. I gave it away in the days when you could give them away.
Well, we still have a reasonable collection here, but...
So this is the report. This is the report. Attorney General and
you wouldn't believe that artificial intelligence told us what page to look at and what volume to look at.
Well, see, there's an interesting story about this decision, which is a joint decision, and quite short. I mean, it's only 24 pages long.
That's right.
For a big case. And the reason it is short is because they essentially disposed of the case on the public international law point.
That's right.
Which was the part of the argument that Lucy had prepared and written up, which was a bit exotic, I thought. And I thought it was good. I'm just saying,
I like that description.
It was when you start quoting Grotius, you're definitely.
So they're a bit like Awais' arguments, Malcolm. Yeah. Some of them are a bit exotic.
But the interesting thing with
it takes a discerning audience to understand it.
Yeah. Correct. But the interesting thing about this was that there was a moment in the argument where Tony Mason said to me, Mr. Turnbull, if we accept your submissions on public international law point, that essentially this case is the British government seeking to enforce the, public law, the Official Secrets Act of the United Kingdom, and that's not maintainable in our courts. If we accept that, then you win, don't you? And all of this evidence is irrelevant. And I said, yes, absolutely. That's our submission. And he turned to Theo and he said to Theo Simons, Mr. Simons, and Simons said, well, I'm afraid to say that's pretty right. Yeah. And he looked to the left and he looked to the right, and you could see the judges all thinking, wow, we can get the right outcome
without having to do this.
We don't have to listen to or respond to what Turnbull's saying about the cabinet secretary committing perjury and all of this unedifying evidence, because a lot of the evidence is very unedifying.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. You did all the hard work at trial.
Correct. Well, and that's right. And the trial judge, Phil Powell, did his job, which was to find the facts. And so Phil did not get diverted by public international law. The Court of Appeal got reasonably interested in it, got fairly interested in it.
And is that because they took a point because they knew the facts were against them? What's that saying? You can only, if you win a case, you need the facts or the law and the justice. If you haven't got two of them, you're stuffed.
This is the sort of the kind of the submission. My submission. This submission is entirely uncluttered by questions of merit.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point was we had as you do, we had to win on the facts, and we were, there are a whole lot of legal issues there.
And the interrogatories that you administered to get them?
Yes, exactly.
Well, the interrogatories seem to get you into a really strong position tactically, where they were adopting this ridiculous position where all of it was objectionable. You offered them as sort of why don't you tell us which bits you've got a problem with?
Offered them to blue pencil book,
and it made it somewhat easier for you to succeed in some senses, because you knew at least some of it was already effectively in the public domain.
Oh, it was. Well, there was a document that we filed, which I have a copy of, obviously still, called "The Consolidated Particulars of Public Domain," and this was about this thick. It was put together mostly by Lucy and Paul Greengrass. Paul was in fact the ghostwriter of Spycatcher, now a very famous film director, successful film director, and essentially it went through pretty much every paragraph, statement of fact in Spycatcher, and then pointed to where it had been published somewhere else.
In another book.
So essentially what it was doing, all the UK government should have just taken that and said, right, thank you, publish that. Because what that demonstrated was that Spycatcher was a load of old cobblers in the sense that it had all been published before.
Nothing to see here.
In Chapman Pincher's books.
And they held a position that the reason why they acquiesced to the publication of the other books was that they got advice, and that was...
Yeah, well, that was a lie.
That was a lie.
Yeah, it was a lie. Yeah, well, I mean, it was worse than that. It was worse than that, because it was a lie, and Armstrong, well, I'll do it properly. It was untrue, and Armstrong apologised to the court. So the statement that they had, that they had been advised, which Armstrong had said in his affidavit, and they'd confirmed in the answers to interrogatories, etc., that the Attorney General, Sir Michael Havers, had advised them that they could not enjoin the publication of their trade as treachery, which is the first Pincher book that Wright had supplied information for. That was untrue. And we flushed that out by getting the Labor opposition in the UK to put pressure on the Conservative government.
Is that Kinnock?
It was Neil Kinnock, yeah. It's Neil Kinnock, that's right. And as we spoke to him, I spoke to him, and and Havers, essentially the Labor Party and the Commons were saying to the Attorney General, you're either a fool or a knave. Okay, I mean, if you gave that advice, you shouldn't have got a law degree. Yeah. And if you did give that advice, then you're dishonest, because it's clearly wrong. And this was the thing that was needling Phil Powell, because Phil was saying, hang on, anyone could just an articled clerk could walk down the Strand and get an injunction on this. Yeah, what? And so Armstrong then had to withdraw it and apologise for having misled the court, and you know what equity courts are like. I mean, they're not as ready to find that people have told lies as the common law division is. Yeah. And this is used to be my experience.
There's still a gentle whisper.
And a part of it is, I think, because they know that the affidavits are always written by the lawyers, and so I mean, it's a. So, having said that, it gets worse. The story gets worse. from the British government's point of view, because our thesis was, or my thesis was, that the leak of the material to Pincher and rights provision of that material to Pincher, which had been facilitated by
For their trader's treachery.
their trader's treachery
Yes.
by Lord Rothschild, was in fact, had been cooked up by the government, and I put it to Armstrong that they had allowed this to happen in order that the information about Roger Hollis, the former Director General of MI5, being a Russian
was suggested as a
agent,
Russian
mole, that allegation come out through the pen of a safely conservative journalist, as in Chapman Pincher, as opposed to someone on the left from the BBC or The Guardian. And Armstrong said, "That's a very ingenious conspiracy theory, Mr. Turnbull, but quite untrue," and then added, for emphasis, utterly untrue. Now, Phil Powell did not make a finding on that, and I think there were probably quite a few people in the court who thought, "Oh, there he is, too young, drawing a long bow," But I know in the back of Armstrong's mind, he would have been thinking, "Oh my God, how did this guy know this?" Because, in fact, it had been Armstrong's idea. And in the last, about 18 months, 2 years ago, some of the Cabinet Office records, a whole bunch of the Cabinet Office records relating to Spycatcher have come out. And in one of them is a memo by Armstrong to Thatcher, approved by Thatcher, in which he recommends briefing Pincher on this very topic. So my conspiracy theory was not quite untrue or utterly untrue, it was utterly true. And the thing that blows me away, even to this day, and you think, by my age and, having all the things I've done in public life, you'd think I'd be pretty cynical. I still cannot believe that the Cabinet Secretary of the United Kingdom committed perjury in the way he did, and knowing that there was a document that he had signed sitting there in a filing cabinet in the Cabinet Office, which proved exactly what I'd put to him.
Wow.
So this, of course, this only came out recently. In fact, it first came out, 5-6 years ago maybe, because before those Cabinet Office documents were publicly released in the Public Record Office, they had been made available to Charles Moore, who was writing the official biography of Margaret Thatcher. And in the third volume, there's a chapter about Spycatcher, and Moore, who worked for Thatcher and idolised her, and is very much her way of thinking politically, and a gigantic fan, even he could not defend Armstrong. Just because it's just.
And there was that fascinating exchange in your memoir.
I'll see if I can find the. Can we see if I can find the memorandum that he sent? I'll find it.
It'll be certainly of use to us.
I could read.
Can you multitask, Malcolm? Can we keep asking you questions while you hunt?
Wasn't there the exchange between yourself and Mr. Armstrong about the distinction between dishonesty and a false impression?
What is the difference between a misleading impression and a lie?
Oh,
yeah.
That's one of those dream questions you get to ask in cross-examination, and very few people get to ask it of someone in such a position, obviously. But Malcolm, what was interesting is how there would seem to be a narrative shift that your legal team and you successfully achieved in that case to turn it into less about something about the importance of state secrets and security into a freedom of the press and a freedom of information type issue. And that would have been and we all know that if you're going to have a good case theory, it's got to be attractive, if you can, at a broader and a deeper level. Given what you've said, and we all know about equity courts, that sort of notion, that's very attractive, isn't it?
I do not think, you guys know much more about the courts than I do nowadays, but I think, you've got to recognise that it's always important to be able to win on the merits.
Yes.
I mean, if you've got the merits on your side, you can still lose if the law is, black and white and very clear. But it's a hell of a start if you've got the merits on your side, and so that was very important. But yeah, it was.
It seems to be you had a good eye for the merits, but because even when you weren't even a lawyer, well, you were still a lawyer when you were working for Mr. Packer. But
I was, yeah.
With the statement that was issued during when the Costigan allegations came out, and how you seem to home in on this idea of procedural fairness. And
yes.
that Mr. Packer hadn't, you said, and obviously it's quite obvious,
we hadn't
been afforded procedural fairness,
totally.
and that enabled to bring the public around, and obviously around in favour of Mr. Packer and against Neville Costigan and was it Mr. Marr?
Frank Costigan,
sorry, and Mr. Marr, who was running he was counsel assisting, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. Douglas Marr,
to sort of again on an issues-based thing that everybody thinks, well, that goes to the heart of being Australian, a fair go.
Yeah,
exactly.
You
didn't get a fair go.
No, that's right, and exactly right, and yes, that's right. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, you see, the thing was that it was interesting. We had this meeting in Kerry's office, as to what the hell we were going to do, because these allegations about him had all been published under a pseudonym.
There was a murder allegation in there, wasn't
there? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, serious stuff.
Yeah. Murder, drug trafficking. I mean, it was
heavy
things.
It
wasn't just tax dodging. No, it was very, very heavy. And these were in so-called case summaries that had been prepared by the Costigan Commission, and the code name for Packer was the Goanna, and they were referred to and then they were given by the Costigan Commission, was leaked by the Commission, obviously, to the National Times, and published in the National, but they published it, right? And so everyone knew who the Goanna was, but no one was saying it because they didn't want, worried about getting sued. And so we had this meeting, and Lucy's dad was there, Tom Hughes, and Jock Harper, who was the senior partner of Allen's at the time, and Alex Shand, QC, another big silk at the time. And we had this meeting, and the lawyers, the older lawyers, were all saying, you should just, sue for libel. And the problem was that Kerry was going to be out of business. I mean, he had television licenses where you had to be a fit and proper person. He had bank facilities, I remember Citibank was getting the wobbles, because, someone in New York saying, my God, we've got a couple of $100 million extended to a guy that's been accused of murder. What's going on? So it was all starting to crumble. Yeah, so
you had to control the narrative.
So I said, we've got to go on the attack, and I presented this statement that I'd written. And I remember one of the lawyers said to Kerry, it's very eloquent, Malcolm's written a very eloquent statement, but, you'll get charged with contempt of the Royal Commission. And Kerry said, took this long drag on a cigarette and said, what's the penalty for contempt of the Royal Commission? They said, maximum 5 years. And he said, he said, I guess I can serve that concurrently with the life sentence for murder, can't I? And so we let it go, and it was really, in those days these things went out on telexes, and the way it worked, the telex operator was this lady called Edith, there on the third floor of 54 Park Street. She typed, copy typed the whole thing and into this tape, and it produced this tape, which then was fed into the telex machine, and it was instructed, and it was going out into every single newsroom in the country, all around the country. And obviously no one was expecting this. And I remember Kerry and I was standing there, and she fed it in, and the telex machine. They had such character, you know. It sort of coughed.
Yeah.
Cough.
Sorry,
cough.
were you
And
nervous
then
at
it
this
went,
point?
No, I wasn't. I don't know that I was nervous, but I
remember how you felt.
was very excited. And then it you know, and it's going out, and you're thinking this is coming off the telex machines, because I'd worked as a journalist. And I knew in all of these newsrooms, people were going, "Oh, what's that coming on the telex?" What? And every single newspaper in Australia ran it in full.
Wow. And you're driving
next
these
day.
forensic decisions, what, as a young 30-year-old? Or?
When was that? That was, oh God, I wasn't 30. Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
How old was I? I might have been 30.
We're gross
29 or
We're
30.
gross underachievers.
That's what I feel like.
mate.
We're
Just you know,
approaching
just
this
sit back in here. But we are getting to interview Malcolm Turnbull, so we'll put, that's an achievement.
And then somehow you casually...
Dangerous. I had a dangerous existence, though.
No, well, but that's what I think of it too. Like these days, we think, God, imagine doing that. But to you, it just seems sort of, well, that's just what I was doing.
But it was, look, it was, I mean, you know, Keating once notoriously said about me to Kevin Rudd, right, this is true, because both Paul and Kevin have confirmed it. Kevin said to Paul, "Oh, what's this Turnbull guy like? I know he's a friend of yours." And Keating said, "Oh, he's really smart, grown, you know, and you know, he's really eloquent, or you know, good, speaks well and so forth." "Oh, grown." He said, "But the good news, Kevin, is he's got terrible judgment." And my judgment is not perfect, but interestingly, with the Costigan thing, it absolutely was, and it was, and you know, it's the sort of thing where, you know, well, the wise lawyers, the older lawyers, were all saying this is crazy, but it was absolutely the right thing to do.
Something stuck with me on that point. I think someone said to you in one of the decisions you made, "You may be wrong, but you'll never be in doubt."
Yeah, often wrong, but never in doubt.
And I just, that sort of stuck with me.
Yeah. Well, that's Sam Chisholm.
Paul Keating also said, always put your money on ambition, because you know it's always trying. And I think he may not have been referring to you, but it's certainly applicable to you.
Allegedly that was a saying of Jack Lang's, who I also knew, but not as well as Keating did, of course. But always back self-interest.
Self-interest, you're right. Yeah,
So,
self-interest.
Nick, mind you, we've got into through Spycatcher. You've gone serious inroads as an investment banker. You've launched Aussie Mail and launched it to NASDAQ.
Yeah, well, I was a sort of junior partner in that. I mean, the founder of Aussie Mail was a guy called Sean Howard,
and then
I was the chairman.
Right.
And the shareholder. I mean, one of the early shareholders.
it's just a phenomenal skill set for someone that didn't like maths.
Yeah. Well,
How'd you use your legal skills in that context, did you find?
Well, most of the big, well, I mean, as a commercial person, as an investment banker, obviously having some legal skills are very helpful. It helps you as Prime Minister too, I might add. You know, as you get more and more separated from daily practice of the law, it's important to, you know, get your instinctive, in principle, views checked. So, of course, if you're the PM, you've got the services of the AGS or the Solicitor General, so you've got pretty good backup. But I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, a practical example. Why is Western Sydney Airport being built by the Commonwealth Government? You know, is it because, as Sky News would have you believe, that I'm a communist and I don't believe in the private enterprise? You know, as they regularly say crazy things about me. No. What happened was, when Howard sold Sydney Airport to Macquarie Bank, you know, 25 years ago or thereabouts or longer, in order to juice up the price, they gave the purchaser a first and last right of refusal to build the Western Sydney Airport, the land for which had been reserved many years before, but nothing had been done at Badgerys Creek. And so when Tony Abbott won the election, you know, and we all went back into government in 2013, I was Communications Minister, obviously had nothing to do with the airport issue, but Abbott and, you know, and Truss and others wanted to get on with the Western Sydney Airport, which is right. They thought, well, we can't we've basically got to deal with Sydney Airport Corporation because you can't go to a third party, you can't put it out for tender because anyone's going to say, well, we spend a fortune on due diligence and feasibility study and offer X, Sydney Airport can just go, I'll give you X and $1 and take it off you. So I had a look, and so they were about to give Sydney Airport a massive multi-billion-dollar, very low interest, very long-term loan as an inducement and a lot of other things to get them to build the second airport, which of course they didn't want to build naturally because they owned Sydney Airport. They didn't want to build a rival to their own business.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you think about it, like, what was Howard thinking? How could it make sense, let alone for the Party of Free Enterprise, to have two airports in the same city owned by the same company? Anyway, I had a look at I thought, this is a terrible outcome. So I put a stop to that, and I had a look at the agreement, the terms of the deal with Sydney Airport, and I thought, well, why couldn't the Commonwealth just build it itself? And we go to Sydney Airport and offer them a deal, and the deal is build the airport, no loan, nothing. You build the airport on got to have certain characteristics, and that's it. There's no soft loan, there's nothing. And when they say no, we'll say, okay, we're going to provide exactly the same terms to this company, which happens to be a wholly owned subsidiary of the Commonwealth of Australia.
Right.
And so that's how and they weren't happy with that, but
that's
it
a very
work.
high level application of commercial legal skills.
Legal skills. We did get that checked, but that's why we've got I might say the project's on time and on budget, which is amazing, but that's why that's happening. But that was if the Prime Minister hadn't been somebody with a entrepreneurial mind like mine, and also, pretty confident in their legal skills.
Could read a contract.
Could read a contract and say, why can't we do this? And then go, to a proper lawyer and say, tell me where I'm wrong. We probably wouldn't have a second airport, because I can tell you that Sydney Airport Corporation, if they had a contract to build it, they would build it as slowly as possible.
You're quite right.
Malcolm, I want to take you to an entirely different topic, and I might start by talking to you about your wonderful podcast called Defending Democracy.
Oh, right, yes.
Produced by yourself,
Kerry
Pinkston. Who's
and before that, Lisa Main.
Absolutely delightful to deal with in organising this with you. I got the sense that the title and the topics, you had a message in that. And it seems as though in the modern world, and a lot of our discussions a bit earlier before you came on air was about the rule of law. What are you seeing? What's the message through that podcast, Defending Democracy, about the existential threat to the rule of law from the world we live in today?
Well, I think it's real. I mean, I think we cannot take democracy for granted. We can't take the rule of law for granted, and it's being assaulted in a whole range of ways, but particularly from what we've called authoritarian populism or populist authoritarianism, and you can see the challenges in the United States. The daily assault on the rule of law. Look at it. There's so many things we could talk forever about what Trump has been up to, but just consider this: that he has targeted law firms and lawyers who represented people that he didn't like, and represented, say, the Justice Department that took proceedings against him. Now. And a number of those law firms have caved in and actually agreed to spend tens of millions of dollars, in one case I think $100 million, for pro bono causes nominated by President Trump. This is staggering.
Are they just deals to get out of the heat of
Yes,
Trump?
they are, because what he was able to do, how did he get them to do that? He said, if you, law firm X, if you don't do this, you will not be able to get into any federal government building. Right? Yeah. Now, if you're a law firm in Washington, your business is, yes, it's, drawing contracts and appearing in court, but it's the big part of it is, representing your clients before government agencies. You might call it lobbying to some extent, but it dealing with the federal government is a huge part of your work. So these, a number of them caved in. A number of them are fighting. A friend of mine who's a lawyer in Washington's firm is actually defending a number of these law firms. So there is a bit of a fight back. But what I found shocking was that the legal profession did not, as one, stand up and say, this is outrageous, this is an assault on the rule of law, we will not stand for it. But, some fought, some caved in. It was pretty scary. The lack of solidarity in the legal profession was terrible.
Malcolm, I asked Nick this question a bit earlier, but he respectfully deferred it to you. We're seeing obviously a swell of identity politics and people living. I think it was a passage I picked up from your podcast. This living in an alternative reality. People aren't living in the same boxes anymore. They're living in their own echo chamber of belief systems, and that's really driving at this authoritarian.
Well, alternative facts.
Alternative facts,
as Trump would say.
What is it about, you think, society and that is making that sort of politics or that sort of identity reasoning appealing to just be able to just join the movement because of the facts, or what's worse, in spite of the facts?
Yeah, well, I think it's all bad. So why is it happening? I mean, it's sort of one paradox piled on another, isn't it? I mean, here we are at a time where we have access to more information than ever before. They're all of human knowledge, can be accessed pretty much from your smartphone. You're in a position to get to the facts of the matter very quickly, and yet we're surrounded with conspiracy theories and lies. We're drowning in lies, okay? So why is that? Frailty of human nature, people believing what they want to believe is part of it. But I think the big technological change was the change in the media. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've gone from having a relatively small number of media outlets, all of which were curated. So to get onto a television station, radio station, or a newspaper, you needed a producer or an editor to, give you the okay. Nowadays, people can self-publish. That's great. You can do your podcasts. I can do my podcast. We can put stuff up on Twitter and Facebook, etc., etc. But you've also seen the cost of media has declined now. Television licenses. Well, who needs a television license nowadays? You just stream over the web, stream over YouTube, and the sort of functionality all of us have in our smartphones. 20 years ago, you would need millions of dollars in a big studio to do it. I mean, God, when I was a television reporter in the 70s, we didn't even have videotape. We used to go out and film literally on film, and you had a reporter, a sound guy, a cameraman, maybe somebody else driving the car, the truck that was carrying all this kit. It's a completely different world. So what that has meant, that all of those technological changes has meant that now that people can live in their own little silos, and I think that's the scary thing, because we're no longer operating in a world where we've got shared facts.
So when facts and truth are so uncertain, how do the institutions respond to that? I mean, do you think our institutions in Australia are responding, government institutions and the like, legal institutions, responding adequately to this scenario?
Well, probably not, but I think they're making a better fist of it than a lot of other jurisdictions are. I think we're lucky. We've got a number of things we're lucky to have. We're lucky to have, above all, compulsory voting. We're lucky to have preferential voting. We've had both of those for a century. We're very lucky to have, when I say lucky, in the sense that this was done by previous generations and none of us can take credit for it. But we're also lucky to have an electoral commission that is independent, draws the boundaries, so we don't have a gerrymandering issue in our federal districts for the House of Representatives. I think in terms of the media, perhaps not so lucky, but we are lucky to have the ABC. And, most of our media, sort of curated media is still fact-based. You couldn't say that about the Murdoch media. You certainly couldn't say that about Sky News. Oh, no.
Because I find
Rupert's media has become largely propaganda. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't individual journalists who write for News Corp publications that are, that are good and, write well. Not at all. But it's that campaigning, propagandising approach of highly politicised approach of Fox News, replicated here with Sky News, is seen in the print as well.
It's almost, I've got to say...
Well, most of it. Not in the Wall Street Journal.
It's almost depressing now to sort of see the disparate perspectives taken in the Murdoch press on any objective issue any issue that takes place in Australia. When you look at the Sydney Morning Herald for one hand, or you look at the the Sky News report on the same thing, I just find it somewhat depressing, and I'm wondering if that's leading to some broader disillusionment with our political systems, our institutions. And what I'm really trying to get at, Malcolm, is that if you were the Prime Minister today, I just feel that our current leadership perhaps not just sort of riding it. What would you do to sort of tackle the problem?
Well, we don't believe in censorship in Australia, right? So, if Sky News wants to broadcast lies and distortions and crazy conspiracy theories and, vendettas, I guess they're free to do that. There was a time when broadcasting licences had to be held by people who were fit and proper. And, I've talked about that earlier in respect of Packer and why that was such an issue when he was accused of all these crimes. If you look at News Corp and, the Murdoch empire as a whole, I mean, how can why is there not a case about their fitness and propriety to have broadcasting licences? I mean, you think about it. I'm not talking about their political views. You look at the Dominion voting case. The fact that they paid what, $875 million US dollars to settle a case where they were accused, and clearly had been guilty, of pumping out lies about the 2020 election, which they knew to be lies.
About the machines.
Yeah, that's right. About about how the machines had been rigged by, Hugo Chavez or something, some crazy stuff. And they did that because that's what they felt, they felt their audience wanted to hear. So they were propagating that was part of the big lie that Trump ran about the stolen 2020 election. And then, of course, you look at the phone hacking in the UK, which is, they're still settling that. It was criminal. That people went to jail about that, and they're, still paying out. I think in total it's been over £1 billion of damages. Now, so you've got to sort of ask yourself. I mean, if I'm going back to my youth as a lawyer that did broadcasting work, boy, you would have had trouble defending an owner of a television licence in the 1970s and 80s who had a track record like that. So there's that issue.
But as a leader of a major political party, is it more difficult? I mean...
Well, it is. Of us, it absolutely is. I mean, you can, Bill Clinton said, never pick fights with people who buy ink by the barrel, right? And it is very, very hard. I think the partisanship the Murdoch press is worse. Even, I mean, they never liked me, right? They were always, they were always part of that right-wing side of the Liberal Party that were my real opponents in politics. But they're much worse now than they were, even when I was in office. But, they've actually played into the Labor Party's hands, because the Liberal Party has fallen into the trap of thinking that the goal of politics is to win the approbation of Sky News and the Daily Telegraph. And so they've run on an agenda that suits that. And what did they end up with? They got wiped out. So,
that's partly thanks to some of the institutions you talked about, like preferential
well, I mean, the
voting.
tools. I mean, we're looking out your lovely chambers here in Martin Place, looking out. I cannot see looking out over the north shore of Sydney and the eastern suburbs of Sydney, harbour, etc., most affluent parts of Australia, not a Liberal electorate in sight. They're all held by independents. And why is that? It's because, this is why Anthony Albanese has 94 seats in the House of Representatives, and the Liberal Party, what have they got? I don't know, what have they got? 50 or something? I think the Liberal Party's less than that, yeah.
Do you think truth to us as a nation is something that we hold, fair dinkum we hold as dear or dearer, and that might help us get through this somewhat?
Well, I think you run the problem. The problem that you've got is, if you want to have a culture war about, say, whether gay marriage should be legal, right? I mean, that used to be a big cultural issue. Nowadays, most people can't understand why it was ever contentious. But that's a question of faith, or values, religion. You have an argument about that. But if you turn everything into a culture war issue, like global warming, I mean, that's madness. I mean, it's like the craze. That's what you've seen this in America now, where science has been. You've got science denial. Vaccines. So you've got vaccines are terrible. We shouldn't have vaccines. Okay. Global warming is a hoax. Okay. So you're essentially denying the laws of physics. And at some point, you run into reality. I mean, if you start getting large sections of the community that are unvaccinated, you will have massive health outcomes, massively bad health outcomes. And of course, with inaction on global warming, of course, we're seeing it. We're living through it. We're seeing that global warming continues.
Now, we know our time is short, but so unless you wanted to raise something, I perhaps wanted to finish off with something that, believe it or not, Craig Laundy said about you, was my biggest regret is that the elements of the party never let Malcolm be Malcolm, never got to see the best of Malcolm in the Prime Minister. Is that something you would agree with or disagree with?
I don't... Well, Craig may well have had an idealised view of what the best of me was, but politics, you can't, in a democracy, particularly a parliamentary democracy, you cannot do whatever you want, and that's a good thing. So you are constrained. You do have to compromise, and people will say, "Oh, it's weakness to compromise and cut deals." I'm sorry, that's what it's all about. Right. Getting things done. If you want to have all or nothing every time, you'll end up with a lot of nothing. So, look, I could have done a lot. I could have done more, and I certainly could have done it for longer had it not been for the right wing of the party who had developed a set on me, which was, I thought, was irrational, but they became very fixated on it. Paul Kelly, who a very distinguished journalist, historian, remember saying to me in 2017, and I wrote this down in my diary. It was because it really struck me. It was such an important thing that he said. He said that at Sky News and the Australian nowadays, he said, they do no longer see the political struggle as being between Labor and Liberal, i.e. between Turnbull and Shorten, but between Turnbull, the soft centrist, and Abbott, the muscular conservative, right? So they're essentially living in that's the world they're living in. And of course, that's continued. And so they have now got control of the Liberal Party and the coalition. And they've burnt it to the ground. They've lost most of their city seats and almost all of their, really affluent traditional blue ribbon seats, either to Teals or to the Labor Party. And they're in command. Well, whoopee-doo, John Howard, hardly a lefty, used to warn about squabbling over the spoils of opposition, but that's kind of what they've reduced themselves to. So it's, the interesting thing is that despite, being confronted with the reality of this, both in 2022 and then in 2025, the message you're getting from that part of the media is we've got to be even more right-wing. Yeah. And so you would think after you've lost all of these seats, in large part on climate, you'd think the response would be, work out a more efficient way to get to net zero. Find something to criticise, find something to improve. There's always lots of scope there. No, the movement is to abandon the, net zero by 2050 target.
Is that what you'd be focusing in on if you were Prime Minister today?
What, the clean energy transition? Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's very. Look, I think it's enormously important. Obviously, I'm in the renewable energy business, but the cheapest form of new generation, primary generation, is solar by a mile, and there are God knows how many million households in Australia that know that because they've got solar panels.
Governments are legislating to make that cheaper, but could they be doing more there?
Well, I think it's cheaper anyway. I mean, the governments have encouraged it, but it is. You see, the thing about solar is that it's a commodity, right? And it is modular. It's a modular commodity. So if you are living in a hut in the bush and you've got one solar panel on your roof charging your smartphone, perhaps, and maybe running a light bulb, that's the same solar panel that is one of 5 million on some gigantic solar farm, out in Western New South Wales. And so that's enabled, that combination of a lot of Australian technology and Chinese, industrial brilliance has brought the unit costs down to become very, very low. And so solar's got very, very cheap. Wind's economics have improved too, but solar's been the big winner. And so what that means is that's our comparative advantage. So then the question is, how do we firm that? And so the answer is storage, pumped hydro, which is a particular interest of mine, but batteries, other things. And I think all we need. I think we've got all of the tools to get to net zero in this country, absolutely. But we just have to make sure we've got to build it. You've got to. Moore's law does not apply to digging holes, and so you've got to get the planning permissions. You've got to mobilise the workforce. You've got to make it happen. So you can't just issue a press release.
Sounds like you're still making it happen, very much so.
I'll try to.
Going great guns with it. It's just been. I know we've run out of time, Malcolm.
Okay.
It's been enormous. Thank you so much for coming on. It's again
been such a pleasure.
An enormous compliment that you've agreed to come on. It's been fascinating. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent.